Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. All right, welcome back to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. Today, we are sitting down in the Autodesk Gallery in San Francisco, and I am joined by Erin Saiki, a superintendent at DPR Construction. And today, we're going to have a really cool conversation about the evolution of the role of superintendent in the construction industry. And I think a lot of really interesting things have changed in recent years. I'm excited to hear about your experience. We're going to talk about the future, a whole bunch of other stuff, but I'm going to shut up now. Erin, how are you doing today? How's it going?
I'm doing great. It is awesome. We're in an awesome space. This building is so cool, and I am just stoked to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's a real privilege to be in here, and I plug this every time we're in the gallery, but if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you really should head over to the Autodesk Construction Cloud YouTube channel because we are in a very cool space. Our production team is doing a great job on the work we're talking about today, so make sure you check that out. Erin, I know you've got a Bachelor's of Science degree in Civil Engineering. I've worked with a lot of folks who have a very similar start to their construction industry career, and most of them tend to go, project engineer, project manager, project executive, maybe head off into the operations team. And that's not a path that you went down. And I'm a bit curious, tell me about that journey. Why didn't you decide to go down that typical path that's in front of most people when they, start as a civil engineer?
Like you said, that's the typical path. And that's really the path that I think presents itself as the most open and accessible when you are getting recruited out of college. And so they're really advocating for project engineers straight out of college. And so that's kind of what everyone hears about. That's what you learn about. That's the examples that you have. But I was super fortunate when I started at DPR. I was hired actually as a project engineer and found out within the first 4 to 5 months that was not for me. I was not thriving in that role. I think my skills didn't lend themselves to that role. And I was super fortunate that within DPR, there was a really fluid structure to be able to kind of pursue what my interests were. And I found that my passion really happened to be out in the field and being a little more intimate with the build. And there were avenues within DPR to allow me to do that. And so I switched from a project engineer to a field engineer. And that kind of set me on the track of superintendent. But like you said, project engineer is really the typical starting point. And I think it's more so than anything else, maybe lack of awareness or lack of knowing that there's an alternate path out there that is super rewarding and fulfilling, and that there are resources to help navigate that path. But a lot of people just aren't aware that that's an opportunity.
And it's really cool that you were comfortable enough and self-aware enough to identify so early down your journey that this isn't the direction I want to go. And also really fortunate to be at a company like DPR that step back, you could identify that. And that's not something that was going to be followed, with a punitive response. And it was just, okay, thank you for letting us know. Here's the opportunity that aligns to what you're excited about or interested about in. And you kind of went from there. And that is really cool. And I don't think everybody feels so comfortable, even if they identify that earlier in their career, to say anything about it. Because, we're all super junior coming out of school, and it's a little bit anxiety inducing to, get a new job that you were supposed to, and you're excited about it. And then you get into it and you're like, this doesn't feel right. And so it's cool that you were comfortable making that shift.
Absolutely. And I think, you hit on that. I recognized that pretty early on in my career, which I'm super thankful and fortunate for. But I also tell some folks that I run into that are project engineers, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years into their career already, that if they feel like that's not fulfilling to them, and, our careers are really long. If we're here through 55, 60, 65, you're spending 30 to 40 years in this field. You really want it to be something you enjoy and are passionate about and want to come to work every day for. And so if you're recognizing that, 3, 4, 5 years in, I tell them that's definitely not a waste of those years, those skills as a project engineer that you've developed, that you've created this really deep foundation of understanding contracts and cost management and RFIs and submittals, those all lend themselves to you being a really well-rounded, effective superintendent. And so I really try to tell them to not get discouraged by the amount of time they spent in that role, and that it's not too late to ever make that switch, because it will just create a different perspective and you'll have a different skill set and tool belt to be able to pull from those years and from that foundation as a project engineer. And so granted, while I was able to make that switch early, I think there are so many skills that a really well-developed project engineer could translate over to become an awesome, effective superintendent.
I really love that point because it's okay to step back and go, this isn't the thing anymore.
Yeah.
And I've gone through that journey myself. I work for a number of general contractors, mostly focused on proposal management and, sometimes contract modification stuff. And I burned out. I bounced hard. And I got to a point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And there was a cloud over that transition. And I was fortunate when I ended up at PlanGrid that, it put me into this position here. But it's funny how careers end up working out too, because if you had told me on the day that I left my last GC and said, I don't want to be a proposal manager anymore, or at least not in the construction industry, if you'd said, hey, you're going to be working at a software technology company and, doing content marketing and all those other things that I was doing through my career, and then sitting in front of you right now, as a podcast host, which is a goofy job title anyway. It's like, but it's a neat one and a privilege for me to sit down and speak with folks like yourself. But if you told me that journey on day one, I'm like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. These things evolve and you find new opportunities and you talk through them and you figure out what's right. And it's okay to change course. Sometimes something doesn't feel right and you go, let's go back and do the other thing. Yeah. And that's okay too.
And it's not a backtrack. It's just it's a why. It's you're taking a different path, but you don't lose all that experience. And so I think keeping an open mind and again, it's a long career. So pursuing your passion and doing whatever makes you feel comfortable and happy and excited to come to work every day, I think should be the ultimate goal.
I love that. And I want to hear a little bit more. How's the job changing? The stereotypical old salt superintendent is one that a lot of folks probably have in the back of their head when we, bring up that job title in general. And, what do the people look like today that are stepping into this role? What's their background and experience like? And how is that position, changing? I'm curious how, what your day-to-day like is in that regard and how other folks are experiencing it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a super interesting time to be in the industry. There is so much change happening with technology, with labor shortages, with resources. There is just so much coming up right now that it is really, really exciting to see because the landscape is changing and you have this kind of group, like you said, of really traditional superintendents that have all this wealth of building knowledge. And you have a lot of up-and-coming superintendents that are coming through the path that I went through, which was a college background, did not come through the trades. So I don't have that tangible physical building experience. And to a lot of people, that can seem like a bar or restriction to be able to go the superintendent route. And it's really not. We are developing ways, like anything else, to train people on how to be proficient at that job. It's about picking up a skill set. And you can learn that through various different means. And so it's really exciting to see kind of these new superintendents come in that definitely have a different background, but still get to interact with this generation of really talented builders that became superintendents. And when you mix them together, we get to see kind of the full spectrum on a project. And that's really exciting. I think right now is a really great time where you have the up-and-coming, innovative, tech-savvy, like really leveraging a lot of our new technology superintendents that are working hand-in-hand with those experienced builder superintendents. And that's a really powerful pairing. It's going to be also interesting to see here in the next 10, 15 years as that group retires, kind of how we backfill that lack of experience, because there is something that you can't get. You have to recognize that and be humble enough to admit, like, I am not a builder. I don't have that experience. I don't have the same stories and the same memories to be able to fall back on that some of those superintendents have as they're planning projects and as they're running their jobs. And so as that wave retires, it's going to be really interesting to see, again, how the landscape changes when you have the bulk majority being superintendents with my background, rather than traditionally we've had the bulk majority be superintendents that have come up through the trade. And so I think right now is really exciting because you have both, but there's definitely going to be an interesting kind of change here in the next decade or so that we'll see how it pans out.
I love that pairing that you're talking about too, because there's so much to learn and retain too. And a part of I think the responsibility of those supers that are coming in with that different skill set is download all this information at me and you get to learn so much. And that goes two ways too, because
Absolutely.
Okay, I come out of school, I know this new technology, or I'm really excited about this particular scope. And I think also the standard of or the expectation of folks not having any tech savvy skills anymore. I don't think that's true anymore either, because if you've been on a project in the last 5 years, unless you're under a rock, there's been technology rolling through your job site and folks are figuring out how to use it. And it's just a matter of, how do we build on this? How do we improve how we're, innovatively approaching this to be more streamlined, more effective, manage our, shortening and ever shortening schedules and surprising change conditions, whether it's, El Nino decides it's going to blow up your project site today, or, some other material shortage rolls in and you go, oh, okay, well, that's a challenge. How do we mitigate this?
Yeah, you made two really good points there that I love. One of those was that regardless, technology is being introduced into the construction world. And there are definitely some superintendents that resist that a little bit. But I think ultimately, like you said, owners are expecting projects to be delivered quicker. They're expecting products to be delivered cheaper. And to a certain degree, you can only do that by keeping up with the times and really evolving yourself. And so it's really awesome to see that change in the industry happen, and you have to evolve with it. You have to grow with it. And it really is cool to see some of those older superintendents interested in picking up on those skills and being willing to say, hey, I don't know. I might be the most experienced guy here. I have 40 years of building, but I don't know how to navigate the model. Can someone help teach me? And it's also really powerful from my perspective because it allows me to barter those skills where I can't come in thinking that I know everything because I don't have that building experience. But I can say, hey, sure, I'll sit down with you and I'll teach you and we can sit together at a computer and work on those skills. And in return, can you go walk the field with me and show me why you thought that this was the best way to set up the scaffold or to plan this work so that I can kind of understand your thought process and your building expertise in that regard. And so it's a really cool and fun time to be able to say, hey, I'll teach you this skill. Can you teach me this skill? And we both grow as a result of it.
It's really cool. I'm encouraged to hear that too, because I think people throw stereotypes around all the time. And, I think there was this McKinsey graphic that everybody would see where it's like construction hasn't been increasing their productivity since the history of time. And at one point in our industry's history, that was relatively accurate. And it's so inaccurate today based on what people are doing. But the owner expectations are also very demanding, not just in the timelines, but they expect to have the visibility into how's their project doing via a dashboard. That's not just a bunch of fancy numbers, but something that is actionable and useful. Like, we're not making things pretty with data now. It's, I want to be able to make decisions. I want to understand this. I want to see where I'm at in a way that's transparent. And if an organization isn't embracing these things, they are not going to be competitive.
Yeah, you get left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Why on earth, if you're a progressive owner and you're getting two equal bids in cost, and one of them offers all of these solutions and technologies and betterments and full visibility, and they think about it in this way, and then the other one is, running their job site off of paper, and they've got an Exchange server and everything just lives in a folder on a drive, and they go, we've gone digital. They're not going with the one that's just putting everything on a drive.
Absolutely.
It's such an important moment right now to consider all of these nuances, and it's pretty cool. I'm encouraged, and I'm also curious, what were some of these challenges that you've experienced? So you stepped into this role, and it was a shift, obviously. Like, where were the surprises along the way, and how did you manage them?
I think a lot of people would think that coming from a college background, the biggest challenge is going to be, like I mentioned, not having that builder expertise and not being able to maybe gain the respect of the folks in the field because you don't have that background. And so there's maybe a lack of shared knowledge and shared experience in that regard. And that is a challenge, but I think that's solvable. You can spend time in the field. You can go out and talk to the workers and the guys. And a lot of them are really eager to share their knowledge and their craft. And they are experts at their craft. They're great at what they do. And they're excited to share that with you. And you can learn a lot from that. So I actually don't think that's the biggest challenge. For me, the biggest challenge was like role models and learning how to navigate my style as a superintendent and my way of running work, because I can't attack it the same way as a 6 foot, 250-pound man can that just walks into the field with such domineering presence that, like, this is the guy that's running the job. He's got the knowledge of where everyone's at, and you cannot automatically have this sense of respect and give them a sense of authority. And a lot of my managers and role models were of that that type. And so I couldn't really look to them and tackle problems and tackle conversations the same way. I had to come and develop a different method of, kind of coming from underneath and saying like, hey, I will be the first to admit I don't know anything. And I'm going to express some vulnerability here and ask you for help. And more often than not, a lot of people are willing to step up and help you. And so I think some of the biggest challenges for me, and the more that we diversify the superintendent field and the more that we kind of get to see and share what those styles are like, the easier it will become. But for sure, as we are navigating this transition from this one very standard type of management style, it's super interesting and took me a few years to really kind of be comfortable with that style and be comfortable with that way of running work.
It's a skill set to be able to step back and go, I don't know this, and be transparent about it. Especially early in our career, we haven't always been given the room to do that. And I've had some managers in recent years, and I've talked about this on Digital Builder before, where they said this very clearly. I want this to be a safe space for you to come and share the challenges and share the problems. And I want to be able to make sure you feel comfortable telling me what's going on, whether it's a work thing or a not work thing. And up until recent years, for me, nobody had ever done that before. And it was such an interesting moment to be sitting in the room during that conversation. Our whole team's there. And, Allie Scott, I know you listen to the podcast. You're one of my favorite, managers in my career. And she was saying this so clearly. And it was just like, wow, like this matters. And it really changed my perspective. And so it's a skill set you have to develop. But I think the reality is the managers also have to very intentionally create that environment and say these things. And you lead by example in that. And people carry that. I mean, I'm carrying it now. We're talking about it. I'd never had it said to me that way before.
And it's not that one way is necessarily better than the other. There are super proficient, amazing superintendents that I look up to that run a very different style from me that I could never pull off or could never really utilize to its fullest. And I'm hoping that I can be someone and become an example of a different style that is equally as effective, but not run in the same way. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. And so, like I said, as we get more and more diversity in the superintendent field and different backgrounds and different POVs from folks coming from college, from trades, from non-engineering or construction-related majors, it just creates this really cool place to be where you can see everyone thrive in a different way and kind of figure it out on their own.
And I love your point about the role model as well. I've had the pleasure of having folks from all different directions join me on the show. And I remember when I interviewed Cliff Cole for the first time. He's a Black engineer at Pentagroup, VDC leader. Incredible dude. He's very passionate about having a very meaningful diversity and inclusion conversation. And his points about role models were so impactful because he would join a GC early in his career and be like, there isn't anybody else like me on this project. And that's not a dig or anything, but there is value in being able to look to somebody else and say, okay, you're very similar to where I am or where I aspire to be. And there's a learning that you can get in that environment too. And so I hope that we can continue finding more role models and making sure that people see that in themselves. I can think of another great conversation with John Fish, the CEO of Suffolk Construction. He has dyslexia. And early in his career, he said that he could barely read at like a 4th or a 5th grade level. And somebody early on was like, okay, I see a lot of potential in this person and I'm going to help them and facilitate their growth in this career. And I'm so grateful for how transparent John is about that because somebody else gets to hear him talking about that and say, okay, this is somebody I can learn from. This is something that is actually possible in the realm of what I do. And that's so validating and important as everybody starts to, develop into their career. It's just really cool to hear more people talking about that in a way that has value.
Yeah, and as I kind of progress in my career, I get more opportunities to work with other younger engineers and folks. And it's kind of a fun puzzle, to get to figure out, how do you tick? And you can't use the same managing style with everyone. How do I cater and develop you and give you the most growth potential and give you a space where you feel comfortable growing and learning and asking all the questions? That's part of the fun. It's when you open your mind and you're like, okay, the differences or, the person across from you not looking like you or coming from the same background, that's your superpower.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be I can't do that because I'm this, or I can't do that because I'm this, or everyone in that group looks or came from this background. No, it's what is not in that group that makes you valuable. And so really getting to be in a position where we get to help kind of grow those people and highlight those skills and give them that confidence, it's probably my favorite part of the job.
And think about the blind spots that exist if you have a group where everybody has the same background and the same focus and the same perspective and experience.
Yeah.
It's very easy to miss what you just don't know. And it's not necessarily somebody who's deliberately like, oh, that doesn't matter or whatever. If you don't know, you don't know.
Absolutely.
And having all these people from different backgrounds, from the different trades, from different parts of the country, all these other, different nuances of education and experience and skill and just life perspective means that your business has less gaps.
Yeah.
There's more people to say, hey, you didn't think about that. This messes this up. And everybody goes, oh, we never thought about that before.
It elevates the whole group.
Yep.
when you have all those perspectives. Absolutely.
So I think we're touching on some of them right now, but I'm interested. Tell me some of these silver linings. Like you're 3 or so years into being a super instead of going down that more traditional route. Like where are the highlights? What gets you fired up every day?
Like I said, a lot of it is now kind of getting to this position where I'm less so focused on my style, and I feel more comfortable there. And so I don't really have to be struggling so much with that challenge. My challenge now is really getting to enjoy the ride and work with younger folks. And that's really where my passion right now lies, is working with our foremen and working with our new engineers and seeing where people want to grow and being able to do my little part in sending them on to their next step. And that's really right now what's exciting. And then there's the whole tech and innovation side of things where we're getting into so many new territories and getting to explore those. And some things work and some things don't. And both of those are things to learn from. And the things that fail often would teach you even more. And so piloting a lot of new technologies and being like, oh, that really did not work out. But hey, this was one bright spot. Let's see if we can really hone in there and see if we can leverage certain aspects of these advances. And yeah, it's really exciting to kind of see all this new tech come out and keep an open mind. And in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it's going to be crazy to see how much growth happens. And so, yeah, I think in general, it's never stagnant. It's never boring. There are new things every single day. And it makes it exciting to get out of bed every morning, for sure.
In creating that space where the innovation conversation is really intentional. I like how you mentioned like something didn't work out, but we learned this small nugget and we carried it forward. Having a safe space to fail quickly and then carry on, that's okay. If it's punitive in response to trying a pilot or doing something different, nobody's going to feel comfortable bringing ideas to the table because, gosh, this puts me at risk. And that's not the direction that we want to go by any means. And so I'm happy to hear that. And I want to go back to talking about the folks that do have more of the trade experience. And so as this superintendent role evolves in the future, I'm curious, where does the opportunity lie for somebody who does have more of that craft and trade experience? And how does that sit alongside the roles and, the background that you have? I'm curious, they're complementary, especially if in that role there might be, sometimes less of that background, especially in 10 or 15 years, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, no, I think this is a kind of a golden opportunity for those folks to seize. And it shouldn't be a time of insecurity or jealousy or feeling like you're getting pushed out of an industry, because as we're shifting and that larger group of superintendents is retiring, it opens up the field for there to be so much more value that you bring when you come from a craft background, because that is going to be dying out here as more superintendents are coming from college to kind of fill the gap. And so I think, if anything, folks that are in the trades and are looking to kind of move into those more supervisory positions should be really excited and should be really hopeful and should be pushing and driving for that path, because the door is not closing on them. If anything, the door is opening to them right now, because we need that background. We need, those hands-on technological skills of a builder, of a craftsman, of someone that really knows the build and can relate to the guys in the field and has that same experience. And so I think it's super exciting, and I hope and encourage a lot of our craft journeymans, leads, foremans to be striving to be a superintendent, because you will bring so much value, and I hope and pray that gets recognized and that the organization that they're working with really sees that value and can elevate them. And so I think really exciting opportunity for them, and not something to look at and be like, oh, well, I don't have the college background and the role of superintendent now requires that. It absolutely does not. It if anything, that's where folks are currently being looked at to recruit from. But if you can be that golden, nugget coming from the field, all the better. You will be absolutely a star.
I love that. And I think it's a message we need to get better at, just communicating outside of folks who are already interested or, part of the construction industry, because we do need more people to be getting into the trades and being educated through that non-traditional, not 4-year college degree program too. And so it's so interesting and cool as I get to hear more and more people talk about, here are the opportunities. Here's how much money you can make in the trades. You don't have all this debt. And there's just a bad perception problem that we're fighting away. And I think we're starting to chip away at it, but there's still a lot of work to do. And I'm just encouraged by it. But we do need to spread this message. We got to be loud and we got to yell it from the rooftops and let people know.
Absolutely. Recruiting right now is a really big focus, I think, for a lot of companies and for a lot of folks in the industry, not only from the craft side and making sure that we're feeding folks into the trades, but also catching folks from college that are coming from those non-engineering construction management backgrounds, because really, I think the strong suit in building, other than you should enjoy what you do and hopefully, building and getting to see whether it's the finishes or concrete or whatever is exciting to you. Beyond that, construction is just a communication industry. It is about people. It is about building relationships. It's about working together to put a product in place and to build a really awesome building that's going to be there for hopefully 50, 60, 70, 80 years. And that you can walk away from and be like, dang, we came together. There was nothing here. There was just blank ground and we've put up a building. And so the skill set doesn't have to be someone from construction management or someone from civil engineering, which is the bulk of, I think, where recruitment is focused in. It can be anyone that has an interest in building or likes the field, but really wants to communicate, wants to work with people, wants to be part of a team environment, be hands-on and not working from home or from anything else. It really requires you to have the passion to get out on site. And so if you check those boxes, it doesn't matter what degree you have or it doesn't matter your background, whether you have a degree or not. There's opportunity there for us, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, I love that too, because it's just so encompassing as far as where you can find yourself. I remember the first GC I worked at, I was coming out of school at the end of the Great Recession. And so it was basically, who will give me a job? And I ended up, as a proposal writer for a general contractor. I knew nothing about construction. And especially working at a federal contractor, for the first 6 months, I was just acronyms sprayed at me all day long. I'm like, what is happening right now? What does this mean? I don't get it, And I think around 6 or 7 months in, I was sitting in a bid review on a proposal I was working on, and I'm throwing out the acronyms and I'm saying the stuff, and I kind of pause and I'm like, where did this come from? And at that point, I would never represent myself with the knowledge and experience of somebody who is out on site building. That's not my background, and I would never try to imply that. But over my career, speaking to new people, listening in these bid reviews, reading the proposals and understanding all of this stuff, I put a lot of really interesting knowledge together. And then I, got an opportunity to do site walks. And I remember the first time standing on the top of a, half completed building that I'd won the proposal for, been the proposal lead on it. And I was just like, okay, this is such a different moment. Like, I've been pushing paper and binders and all this stuff.
So tangible.
And now I'm there.
Yeah.
This is a thing. This isn't just, we're just putting this technical narrative together and I'm looking at plans that I don't understand. Like, wow. And there's a lot to be said about that. And I think if we can communicate that to folks in a way that gets them as fired up as you are right now, like, it's going to be a big win for everybody.
Yeah.
I love it. It's cool. I haven't been on site in a while. I'm picking away. I'm trying to get back out again because I just enjoy walking around and seeing what's happening. And I want to see how it differs from the last time I was doing a site walk a couple of years ago. It's going to be cool. What advice would you give to the companies out there right now? I mean, we've talked about this recruiting, challenge and the labor challenge at a high level. What can these companies do to find these non-traditional backgrounds and convince them to join their organization, or even make sure that they know that there's an opportunity here?
Yeah, more often than not, I think it's really about the people and making it about the people and not making it about a quota or a number that you have to hit to try and backfill for a big project or something. It's building those relationships. And most people in college, even if they are getting their degree, don't really know what they want to do. They have no industry experience. They don't really know what gets them excited. They have maybe dreams or ideas about it. But I think the most powerful thing is to build a relationship and be genuine with them. And if you click and they click with you, I think that's the best door to open to have them be interested in in coming into construction, because ultimately it is a people industry. It is not, you don't have to be a civil engineer or a construction management background. It's about people. And if you like talking to people and interfacing with people and you click with folks around you, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It'll be a family, and that'll make it an environment that you want to be in and that you want to contribute to, and part of that team and getting to that goal. So I think it's definitely reminding ourselves to treat our recruits as people, and again, not numbers, and trying to really figure out like what sparks your interest. There's so many avenues within construction as well, whether that be BDC or scheduling or innovation or on-site and ops or doing pre-con. Like there are so many avenues. As long as you find the fit and they're part of the family, well, chances are there's something in one of those avenues that they'll be excited to do and that they'll find is kind of a passion for them. And so, I think that's my take on where we should be focusing.
I love that. And I can think of a few industries where there are so many people and companies and organizations all crammed into this small spot that all have to interact and communicate and collaborate. And there's such a thing to be said about how you find your skill set and how you navigate that challenge. And as I mentioned earlier, construction trends towards litigious on occasion. And so there's some conflict and tension there. But I think as long as we're really just acknowledging we're all people, everybody has good intentions.
Yeah.
There is a path through that. And, there's a delivery method conversation we can say for another day that I think we can, improve how those relationships go. But there is, we're just rife with opportunity. And I think we can continue to communicate that. So yeah. I like that. And what advice would you offer to somebody who wants to follow a similar path to you? So say they've rolled out of, Berkeley, and they're a civil engineer at this point. They're listening to this right now and they go, ooh, I think I should be in the field right now, regardless of what company they're at. Like, what would you suggest for them?
I think there's a certain level of advocacy, and hopefully they're in an environment that, like you had mentioned, I was super fortunate to be in an environment where they were open to that and were giving me avenues to get to where I needed and the support that I need to get to become a superintendent. If those avenues aren't there and that's really where your passion lies, then chase after that and find a company that will support that. And hopefully as the industry evolves, more and more companies are open-minded to that. But if you're not currently at one or you're not currently looking at one, maybe that's an indication to look somewhere else. Outside of that, I think just coming from a place of learning and staying passionate about wanting to learn and be a sponge and absorb all this information, because it is a fire hose on site. Yeah. You learn so much, especially if you're working on the GC side where you're interacting with every single trade partner and subcontractor on site. It's not just learning plumbing. It's learning plumbing, HVAC, drywall, painting, concrete. Like you're learning the whole gambit. It's enjoy the learning process. Be open to learning. Ask a lot of questions. And that'll ultimately get you to a place where your foundation is sturdy enough to run work and to feel confident interacting with everyone that you see on site.
Yeah, I think it's an industry, you're not going to be bored.
Absolutely.
There's a new thing happening every day, and there's only so many conditions we can control, whether it's, how people are acting and behaving on a site, or the weather, or what the city has decided to do today, or our permit didn't show up on the day that we expected it to. And now we kind of got to sit on our hands, or where's our materials and our laydown areas full of stuff that's not supposed to be there. Like so many things can happen on a project. And I don't say this in an alarmist way, like, oh gosh, like be careful. If you want this unique and engaging environment, yeah. Like, construction is a great place
exciting.
To be. Yeah,
super engaging. You're never bored. And while that mountain of information might seem daunting, just one thing every day. Learn one thing new every day, and you're making steps and you're making progresses to your goals. And so appreciating the process, I think, is really something that I'm working on myself to make sure that I'm learning every day. And as long as I'm doing that, I can't go wrong.
I love that mindset. I'm privileged to be able to learn from, folks like yourself every day too, because I get to talk to so many cool people all the time. And it's a very rewarding way to spend your time when every day is a little bit different. And I think it's obvious you are passionate about the field and empowering the field. And I'm curious to hear more about your perspective. How do we do that better? How do we empower the field in a way so they can get their jobs done in the way that we're expecting them to, and have all the information and make all those choices and decisions and everything when they're out in the field?
I think it's really about being an active listener and following through on what you're hearing and the problems that you're hearing. I think so often we get stuck in construction with the big problems, the $1 million problems that kind of are right in your face of where when you're working in a trailer environment and you're seeing all these change orders or schedule delays or whatever, you have all these big impacts right in your face. But taking the time out to go and talk to the workers that are actually installing, hearing where their constraints are. And as long as we're removing the physical constraints in the field is king. The job will get done. You will end up losing more money and losing more time if you're sitting in a trailer environment, going through emails, trying to resolve all these issues and ignoring what's happening with the craft. And so I think it's really about empowering their voice and making them feel heard and realizing that they're the people that we need to be listening to. They're the people that we need to be going and talking to and figuring out what their issues are so that we can remove those roadblocks. And then once they do open up to you and you can hopefully build a level of comfortability where they're letting you know issues and are being super vocal, that you're not brushing those under the rug, that they're just as high priority, if not higher priority on your list for the day than the emails that you're receiving in your inbox. And so I think that's really kind of twofold of listening and then following through. And if we repeat that cycle, it just creates this environment and this culture on site of we're going to help be part of the solution here. And everyone will start feeding you all the information you need to win and to be successful. And that's really where you know that the job is running smooth when you have that level of communication from the craft on site.
I really like that. And you said something the last time that we spoke that really resonated with me, where more often than not, folks consider sharing information with the superintendent as sharing information with the field. And I'd like to hear you unpack that a little bit more, because I think there's an interesting nuance there as far as information access and an equitable way to know what's going on. And I'll stop. I don't want to speak on your behalf, but it was a really interesting point you made.
Yeah. So maybe this is just my perspective as a superintendent, but I don't want to be the bottleneck of information. And so, if all this information from all these parties outside, architect, structural engineer, owner, whoever is getting fed to the superintendent, you naturally have created a roadblock in the system to then disperse all that information out to the field. And as long as that's the process, ultimately something's going to drop. It could be PTO, it could be a sick day, whatever you have it. It's impossible to be having that be 100% of the time getting all the information out into the field. And so I think something that I've been really trying to emphasize and create processes around is how do we directly take that information and feed it to the craft and remove that roadblock and remove that bottleneck that if I'm sitting in a 4-hour meeting, no information is getting passed to the craft. And that's an awful feeling that someone could be putting work in place without the proper information through no fault of their own. And so I think it's creating opportunities for the guys in the field to be able to have those answers and to be able to have the critical thinking and make those decisions and know where to be looking for that information. I think we're sometimes going too far into the efficiency mode of like, let's take thinking out of it and make it so A, B, C, D, make it this process and super lean. But if we take all the critical thinking out of the field and not allowing them the opportunity to really understand that information and then build it the best way that they can because they are the person, the expert at their build, like it's just creating downstream problems that are definitely not worth it and no one wants to deal with. And so I think coming up with ways to share information with the craft is super, super important, whether that be through ACC and getting the foreman access and taking the time to make sure they actually understand how to use that software and to really be able to leverage it. And then beyond that, looking for opportunities where not just the foreman, but the journeyman and the leadman and their apprentices on site can access information and know what they're building. It could be as simple as renderings and photos of what the final product can look like. Half the time, the guys in the field don't even know if they're building because they're never in the model or in the drawings and really seeing like, this is the final product. But if they had that opportunity and had that information, they could probably be making a lot better decisions for themselves, for their production, for their bottom line, and then for our production and bottom line as well. And so it makes the whole wheel run smoother when you find a way to get that information out to the craft and let them really be able to wield that in such a powerful way.
I love everything you're sharing here. And there's such an equity conversation too. That's just, it's both about the individual and the greater good of the project. Nobody wants to be the gatekeeper, whether it's intentional or otherwise. Yeah. And we have to build our processes and use tools and technology that avoids that situation. But I think your point about the critical thinking alongside what the project plan is such an interesting but important nuance as well, because of course we want to make sure that the path to completion is straightforward and people know what to expect. But if you don't give them that room to add that layer of critical thinking where they step back and go, okay, it says A to D, but this is weird.
Yeah.
And if you're not giving them the room to be like, to even think this is weird and maybe point it out, not 9 times out of 10, maybe everything is fine. And it's supposed to be A to D that way is.
Absolutely.
But that 10th time, that's a change
That's
order.
a gap. It's a gap. And it's something that I think does take a little of an upfront lift to create means for them to access that information and then to teach them how to use that information. But once you do, that feedback loop, it feeds itself and they go to their next project and they already have those skills. And so I think it's definitely worthwhile to take that time. And then not only that, like you said, maybe they're looking at something not quite right. It really plays into safety, where safety has gotten, the safety culture on site has become such a hot topic recently, and really making sure that, we are coming up with the safest way to build projects. Again, the person most at risk on site is the person putting the work in. So if you are not involving them in the plan and they don't understand what the product is supposed to look like or what the intention is, and they just do X, Y, Z, and maybe they do X, Y, Z perfectly, but the person that put together that plan was me, and I wasn't thinking about the whole picture, or I don't have that experience actually finishing concrete. Like, you're missing a huge perspective that could be catching those safety things. And so in every aspect of the build, both in quality, safety, production, constructability, like if we can engage those perspectives and give them the means to feel safe asking those questions, that it's ultimately going to end up in a better product for the owner, likely faster with less rework. Like, imagine how much smoother jobs could go and how much more of a collaborative environment we could have on site if from top to bottom, left to right, every single person understands what the build is supposed to be.
And I think the nuance that I'm going to grab from everything you just shared here is, you said feel safe to ask the question. And I think that this maps to obviously safety. Like there's a very intentional culture around this to say, if you don't think this feels safe, it's okay to say this. This isn't a punitive thing.
Absolutely.
I don't care if the schedule gets blown up by 2 weeks, if we've identified something where somebody might get hurt. You have to communicate that and make sure that they understand that that's true. But this extends well beyond safety as well. And especially if you think about the folks that are early in their career, like we were talking about earlier, it can be anxiety inducing to come up and raise your hand and say, hey, I don't get this, or I don't understand this, or I don't think that this is right. And if somebody responds to that in a blustery way, or has never said that it's okay to ask those questions, they're going to be even less inclined to do it.
And it takes so little.
Yep.
It takes so little. It's one decision, one mistake to cause catastrophic downstream impacts. And so, yeah, it's creating an environment where people feel comfortable learning and everyone realizes it's a learning experience and they feel comfortable asking the questions. I'll loop that back into just having different POVs for superintendents for in this job site, because I will never be the one with experience of, oh yeah, I've been tied off, or I've stood on beams in the air and have to do all this really dangerous stuff so that I feel like, oh, I've done that before, you'll be fine. I can never make that call because I've never done it. And so I really can't put myself in their boots and be like, oh yeah, skip that step. You're going to be fine. Like, that's just the way that we do it. I don't know that. I've never done it myself. So I have to pause myself and ask, okay, that could be a total legitimate concern. Let's chase that down and get to the bottom of it. And so it's just creating that kind of extra layer where some people might take that as being naive or not having enough experience, but I think it does lend itself to creating an environment where I'm equally as open to ask the question and chase that down versus someone that 9 times out of 10, probably fine. They've done it a lot. They've done it for 20 years, 25 years, never had a problem. Just takes that one time for that one apprentice to make a mistake and suffer consequences from it. So I think the more POVs and perspectives we can have from people with different backgrounds, the safer that environment will feel to be able to ask those questions.
I love that. You've done my job for me in that tail end as far as just connecting that thread back. But you're so right. As far as just the intention there impacts everything that we do, the way we build, the way we communicate, the relationships that we build. And I'm very encouraged and appreciative of everything you've shared here today. I've got one more question for you today.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what is one tool that you'll take to every project that you work on, no matter what the project is?
That is a really, really good question.
It's a big question.
I probably have an answer that doesn't quite fall into that. But as a superintendent and the projects and the scale of the jobs that I work on, I think for me, the tool I leverage the most is the model. And I know that not every job has the resources to have a fully baked model, but I think it's so powerful to catch things. Every little thing we catch in the model before it makes its way out to the field is a win. And they're a little bit unsung because you never really feel the impact of it. You never see the cost or the schedule that you saved by doing it. But everything that we catch in that model process is so powerful and so rewarding, and someone knows that you just saved them $100,000 or $1 million. And the other part of that I'm really excited for and really pushing for is right now, that's my favorite tool. But I bet you if you asked a lot of foremen or a lot of lead men, that would not be their answer. And most of them probably wouldn't have any access or experience with it. And so I'm really excited to see a world in which those guys are also accessing and using and leveraging my favorite tool in a way that benefits them, and that we get to a point where they're also diving into the model. And I'm sure from their perspective, with their builder brains, they're going to find way more things than I would ever find from my experience and my background. And so I think right now it's the tool that I leverage the most and really feel like is the most powerful. And I think it has a lot of room for growth if we can get to a point where the foremen and folks in the field are also seeing the build before they're building it.
I like that. And I think we're getting closer. I mean, there's so many tools now. I know Autodesk offers some. I'm not going to ramble about that or anything, but there are tools that are available now where the field teams can do it on their phone. You grab your cell phone, you go, I'm going to take out the model, take a look. 5 years ago, like, good luck. You know, that wasn't a thing.
Yeah, within ACC, we have the model for our project, and you can pull it up anywhere on the job, and the foreman can get in there and really pull dimensions, look for clashes. Like, it takes so much out of the workflow that would normally have to circle back around to me. Again, I'm the bottleneck. I don't want to be, but from lack of training and empowering and letting our craft be able to find those answers themselves, I end up invariably being the bottleneck. And so I don't mind taking 30 minutes to teach someone and to show them where to access that and teach them the 101 do's or don'ts, because they're going to pay that back tenfold over with the things that they then save me by not having to come to me and ask those questions. So it's super exciting to kind of get to see that, like you said, within 5 years. Imagine where we're going to be in 10. Like, it's going to be crazy.
And that training portion that you're talking about is so key as well. You can hand everybody all the tools in the world. If you don't show them how to use it, and especially how your organization expects them to, and not in like a super prescriptive way, but it's just, this is the value, this is where this is. They might get into it and also teach you something too. Or they go, hey, I found all this stuff and this is really neat.
Absolutely.
And you might know too. So I think we all have to really build up our training programs. And I feel like organizations are getting better about it. But there is a lot of complexity. There's a lot of technology on the site, and we want to empower everybody with that. And it's not just acquire the technology. It's let's show everybody how to use it and why we're doing this, and be intentional about that deployment
and
too.
To not stop it at the superintendent level. Like we said, I should not be where that training ends. And a lot of the times that seems to be like what's offered is like, oh, at this level, like that's when we're introducing you to these things. Is no, we should be trying to trickle that down as far as we can to everyone on site, because that just makes everyone so much more empowered to know and ask the right questions. You don't know what you don't know. And so it really doesn't take much to take a little time every day to really impact someone's learning experience, and they'll take it from there. And so, I think that's my biggest takeaway from an equity perspective of training and leveraging technology is let's see what we can do. Let's challenge ourselves to really get it out to the field.
And I think you're setting up the next superintendents as well, because you've given them a glimpse of that technology too. And when they step into a new role, they've already got those skills because you've trained them. You've showed them that it's possible. And I think also that gets that spark going. People get fired up. They go, okay, I can do this more in this role. Heck yeah. Like away we go.
If you can do this, you can do anything. And it's really just about creating that confidence and creating that safe space and realizing, okay, that wasn't as hard as it looks. From 100 yards away, that seemed impossible. But now that I'm up close, I could do that every day. And you really build that confidence within everyone to keep pursuing that growth.
All right. Well, Erin, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for joining me. This has been an absolute pleasure. Everybody out there listening, I'm going to say it again. We are in the Autodesk Gallery today in an absolutely beautiful space. Erin can vouch for that, I think. And you should make sure you head over to YouTube, check out what we're doing right now. It's a whole bunch of fun. Otherwise, of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the normal podcast players, we're over there. If you want to ask me a question or you're curious about something, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am Eric Thomas or Builder_ on Twitter or X or whatever you you want to call it these days. It doesn't matter anymore. And without any further ado, oh, and also please go review us. Give us 5 stars if you like this show. That always helps us out. It makes me happy. Not just feel special, but make sure other people can find the show too. And without further ado, goodbye.